Michigan Democratic Congressman Andy Levin introduced a resolution today that would allow House staffers to form a union. This resolution comes amid complaints from Capitol Hill workers who say they're tired of dealing with low pay, long hours, and hostile workplaces. Congressman Levin joins me now from Capitol Hill to discuss his proposal. So, big question, Congressman, just how bad are working conditions?
Well, you know, Major, one of the big themes of my life as a union organizer going back to 1983 is that everybody deserves the freedom to form a union. And, you know, the most unionized industries in this country are professional athletes, actors in film and TV. So those aren't the people with the worst working conditions, but they're very highly unionized. What about pilots who are quite well paid? So everybody deserves a chance to have a union, and it's to our shame, really, that way back in 1995 when the Congressional Accountability Act was passed, and we rolled it out in '96, my predecessors did, they included other Hill staffers. So the architect of the Capitol staff, the Library of Congress staff, the Capitol Police, all the folks who work here are able to form unions except the staff in our personal offices and in our committees. And that's just wrong. It's a fundamental human right to have the freedom to form a union. And so that's what we did today, is just say we have to give these folks the protected right to have a union. And then as to their working conditions and so forth, they certainly have been talking a lot about them, haven't they?
No doubt. Now, as you mentioned, you organize for unions. One of the reasons unions exist is to shield workers from exploitation.
Yes.
The underlying assumption here is that there is something exploitative about the work conditions carried out by members of Congress on those who work for them. Is that a fair assessment?
You know, as I was saying, I don't really think that only the most exploited workers should be able to form a union. I think during this pandemic, workers of all kinds across the country have been reevaluating their jobs. It's been such a strain on their health, on their mental health, on being able to live. People have no boundaries between work and family life or home life. And so I think it's natural that congressional staffers, just like workers at Starbucks and just like workers at Amazon and so many private companies and other, public agencies, are saying, hey, let us have more say in our working conditions. And if there are situations where there's racial discrimination or unfair pay or unfair benefits, they have the right to bring that up and bargain over it. So I'm all for them.
So, Congressman, on your Twitter feed this morning, you tweeted, questions surrounding exactly how the unionization process will work are appropriate for another day. Forgive me for saying so, but this seems like this should be part of the discussion up front, shouldn't it?
Well, people are free to talk about it anytime, but here's the thing, Major. In this country, we have a problem of workers lacking the freedom to form unions. It's worse here than in any other industrialized democracy. The percentage of workers who have unions in other countries is much higher. Collective bargaining coverage is much higher. What I was trying to say this morning is this day is about giving this set of workers a fundamental human right of freedom of association at work that all workers deserve. And so let's get that done. Let's pass this resolution as soon as we come back, or as quickly as possible, so that our workers have the freedom to form unions. You may notice they're still anonymous as a union movement because they don't feel they have legal protection. And so before we get into talking about, well, how will it work? Will each office organize separately? And what if some offices organize and others don't? And all those very legitimate questions, let's give them, after 26 years, the basic right to form a union in the first place, gosh darn it, and then open the floodgates about talking about all those practical matters.
Congressman, a moment ago you made reference to the Congressional Accountability Act. 1995 legislation became operable in 1996. Are you talking about amending that and making this part of the federal code, or would this just be a change in House rules?
It's just so the House and the Senate each have the power to pass a resolution to bring their personal office staff, district and DC office, and our committee staff under the legal protection of the CAA for collective bargaining. We failed to do that back then. When we applied the collective bargaining rights to all the other thousands of staff on the Hill, we left our own staff out. It's time for us to walk the walk and give our own staff the same right that workers in the Library of Congress or the architect of the Capitol or other parts of the congressional workforce have. The basic freedom to have a union without fear of retaliation.
And just as a practical matter, Congressman, I'm really curious about this. So most congressional offices and committees have a member who leads it, or a chairperson, and then a chief of staff, and then a pyramid that flows down from that. So who would be doing the negotiating? Would the chief of staff negotiate with the lawmaker, or would there be some intervening buffer zone or some board or something? Have we got enough clarity on how that might actually work?
Well, so again, that's for the workers that have to organize a union. But, you know, as a union organizer and a labor lawyer, I can tell you that every workplace has management staff and rank and file staff. So it would be likely that some people who supervise others would not be in the bargaining unit, and then most workers would be in the bargaining unit. And then the management staff would negotiate with the workers who get to be in the bargaining unit, just like any other workplace.
Understood. Turning to another issue, as you've seen and many Americans are learning about this week for the first time, there's a protest movement going on in Canada over COVID restrictions. It has blocked a key bridge near your district. What are your thoughts on that overall protest movement? Do you think it could come to the United States, and what effect is it having in your district?
Well, so the protests at the Ambassador Bridge, which carries something like 40% of all the trade between the United States and Canada, I don't know the exact amount, but it's a lot of it. And earlier protests in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. Here's what I have to say about it, Major. People are free to protest in Canada as in the United States. That needs to be protected. They need to have an avenue for protesting. But I don't think the freedom to protest rises to undermining the commerce between the United States and Canada, or for that matter, blowing your horn of your semi 24/7 in a residential neighborhood in Ottawa. So I think it's time for the government of Canada to step up and say, well, this is a protest about national policy, and we've got to find a venue for these folks to protest as much as they want, but they can't do it by shutting down trade between the United States and Canada when our supply chains are already under such strain because of what COVID, the pandemic, has done to our economy. For example, we have way too few semiconductor chips that we need to put in our autos so our auto companies can sell them. They have many customers just waiting to buy cars, and we've got to be able to keep the flow of goods moving between the United States and Canada.
Congressman, as you well know, Michigan generally, the Detroit area specifically, home to a significant number of Ukrainian Americans. You sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. What are you hearing from your constituents? What are your overall thoughts about where things sit, Russia, Ukraine, United States, NATO, and the like?
You know, I just participated in a special session on the House floor to speak about this. Last weekend, I was at a prayer vigil in one of the Ukrainian churches in Southeast Michigan, and I'm a member of the Ukraine Caucus, and my dad was a co-founder of it. So this is really personal to me. The Ukrainian American community in my district is so vibrant. I am really worried about it. The United States has done a great job so far of working to unite all of our European allies. That's really important, that we have a united front against Russia to say, you may not invade Ukraine further. You've already invaded it in 2014. You've taken land inappropriately. You've interfered in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass region as well. That's the end of it. You may not do it. And we have to be very, very clear about the sanctions we will impose. They should be very clear that there will be no new pipeline, that they'll be kept out of the international banking system. Very, very severe sanctions. You know, if Putin goes ahead and does this, he'll be getting exactly what he said he doesn't want: more active NATO presence closer to his borders. So the best way to deal with conflict is through diplomacy, and I'm really hoping that we can negotiate a way to keep Russia from further invading Ukraine. The loss of life would be tremendous, and I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin realizes how many Russian soldiers would be coming back in body bags, because the Ukrainian people are united in wanting to have what all people deserve: self-determination, the freedom to choose their own leaders, and the sovereignty of their country, and that their borders be respected. So it's a very delicate situation, and we're following it very closely.
We have less than a minute to go. The perception is Build Back Better is dead, and there's plenty of blame to go around. White House, progressives, moderates, so-called. Is it dead? Do you foresee any parts of it coming back to life in this congressional session?
Yeah, so I'm not willing to accept that it's dead. I'm going to keep fighting for it. I don't really agree that there's a lot of blame to go around. 96% of Democrats in the House and Senate are all united on Build Back Better. There's just a couple of people, Mr. Nyet from West Virginia, principal among them, who keeps moving the goalposts. After all, his famous note with Chuck Schumer said what he would do through the reconciliation process to pass Build Back Better, and then recently he said, oh, everything has to go through committee processes. That's the exact opposite of what he said earlier. So we're going to keep fighting for it to the end, because the American people need relief from high prices. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs, lower the cost of child care, make pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds free. These are major things. They're goods for the American people. They add to the public good, but they also relieve price pressures, which Americans are facing in a lot of parts of their lives right now.
Renaming the senator from West Virginia, Congressman Andy Levin, Democrat from Michigan. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.